Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another historical journey. Tonight, we travel far back in time to a world built of sand, stone, and ancient rivers. We are stepping into the quiet origins of a grand empire that stood proud under the desert sun. Before we let the sands of time drift around us, please take a moment to like this episode, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a comment letting us know where you are listening from. It costs nothing at all, but it helps the channel a tremendous amount, and it allows us to continue creating these journeys for you. Let your mind wander now, as the sun begins to set over the ancient land of Egypt. The sky above is a vast canvas painted in shades of deep violet, bruised orange, and a soft, fading gold. The relentless heat of the daytime sun is finally lifting, giving way to a much softer, more forgiving atmosphere. As the glowing orb dips below the horizon, it pulls the harsh light away, replacing it with a serene and gentle twilight. Imagine the vast, unbroken horizon of the desert spreading out for miles in every direction. A cool evening breeze begins to stir, sweeping across the tops of the dunes and carrying with it the subtle, earthy scent of river reeds. This gentle wind is a welcome relief to the land. It whispers against the limestone cliffs and rustles the leaves of the scattered palm trees that stand like quiet sentinels in the fading light. At the very heart of this immense landscape flows the mighty Nile River. It is the lifeblood of the empire, a wide, sweeping ribbon of dark water cutting its way through the surrounding desert. In the twilight, the surface of the river reflects the changing colors of the sky, shimmering like liquid glass. The water moves with a heavy, steady rhythm, an ancient pulse that has sustained this land for countless generations. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the soft, rhythmic lapping of the water against the muddy riverbanks. Small wooden fishing boats, their day's work completed, bob gently near the shore. The ropes securing them creak softly in the wind, a soothing, repetitive sound that lulls the surrounding villages into a state of rest. The river is calm, unaware of the turbulent events that history has prepared for its waters. Further inland, away from the water's edge, the great cities of Egypt begin to quiet down. The massive stone temples and towering monuments cast long, imposing shadows that stretch across the plazas. These structures were built to last for eternity, perfectly engineered blocks of stone resting heavy and silent against the earth. As darkness falls, they look like sleeping giants guarding the secrets of the pharaohs. Inside the grand palaces, the evening rituals are underway. Small oil lamps are lit one by one, casting warm, flickering glows against walls covered in intricate, painted hieroglyphs. The scent of myrrh and frankincense drifts through the long, open corridors. Soft linens rustle as the royals and nobles retire to their quarters, surrounded by a luxury that feels completely detached from the world outside the palace walls. But out beyond the city centers, in the humble settlements built of simple mud brick, a different kind of quiet settles over the land. This is the land of Goshen, where the Israelites dwell. Their homes are small and closely packed, their days filled with exhausting labor under the unforgiving sun. Yet, as the night arrives, there is a shared, unspoken relief among the people. The work is done for the day, and families gather close in the dimly lit rooms, sharing quiet conversations and modest meals. Above it all, the night sky slowly reveals its majesty. Without the glow of modern lights to hide them, the stars of the ancient world shine with breathtaking clarity. Constellations map out stories of gods and heroes, rotating silently overhead just as they have for thousands of years. The air grows colder now, completely separated from the memory of the scorching afternoon. The entire kingdom is wrapped in a profound stillness. The rich and the poor, the masters and the enslaved, all find equal rest under the same canopy of stars. It is a peaceful moment, a suspension of time where the struggles of the day are momentarily forgotten. It feels as though this quiet could last forever, unchanged and undisturbed. Yet, beneath this blanket of tranquility, a profound shift is waiting to happen. The heavy stones of the pyramids and the soft mud of the riverbanks are completely still, but destiny is already in motion. Far away, out in the deep, silent wilderness, a single man has been given a heavy burden. A message has been spoken from a burning bush, and the echoes of that command are slowly making their way toward the golden throne of Egypt. But for now, the empire slumbers. The Nile flows steadily on its northern path. The desert wind continues its gentle sweep across the sands, and the stars keep their silent watch over the resting world. Breathe in the cool night air. Let the quiet of the ancient world surround you, and prepare to witness the dawn of a new era. As the deep night settles over the vast Egyptian landscape, the moon rises higher into the clear desert sky. It casts a soft, silver glow that paints the edges of the sand dunes and reflects off the gentle waters of the Nile. The world is enveloped in a profound silence, a quiet so complete that it feels almost heavy. This is the hour of shadows and dreams, a time when the waking world surrenders to rest. In the heart of the capital, the grand monuments of the empire stand as silent witnesses to the passage of time. The towering pyramids point toward the heavens, their perfectly smooth limestone surfaces gleaming faintly in the moonlight. These are mountains made by human hands, built to elevate the pharaohs to the realm of the gods. They cast immense, sharp shadows that stretch out across the sand, dark reminders of the absolute power resting on the throne. Surrounding these monuments are the sprawling palaces of the elite. Behind high, protective walls, the rulers of this magnificent land sleep in cool, spacious chambers. Polished marble floors hold on to the chill of the night, offering relief from the heat that will inevitably return with the sun. The faint, musical sound of water flowing from indoor fountains echoes through the empty courtyards. Here, there is only comfort, security, and an unshakable belief in the eternity of their kingdom. But power, no matter how grand, always casts a long shadow. Far from the fountains and the polished marble, in the eastern delta, lies the region of Goshen. Here, the moonlight falls on a very different scene. Thousands of small, tightly packed homes made of baked mud and straw line the dusty, narrow streets. This is where the Israelites live, the people whose endless labor has built the great store cities of Pithom and Ramesses. Inside these humble dwellings, the breathing of exhausted men and women fills the dark, crowded rooms. Their sleep is heavy, brought on by the grueling physical demands of the brickyards. Every day is a relentless cycle of gathering straw, mixing clay, forming bricks, and hauling them under the punishing whip of the taskmasters. Their bodies bear the scars of this harsh life, and their hearts carry the weight of generations spent in bondage. Yet, even in the darkness of captivity, memory survives. As they sleep, perhaps they dream of a time long past, a time before the chains. Fathers and mothers have passed down the ancient stories to their children, whispering them in the dead of night. They speak of a homeland far away, of ancestors who walked freely beneath the open sky, and of a God who made a promise to their people. These stories are a fragile thread of hope, keeping their spirits from breaking entirely. The contrast between the two worlds is absolute. One world sleeps wrapped in fine linen, confident in its own supremacy. The other sleeps on hard earth, praying for a deliverance that seems like an impossible dream. They share the same air, the same river, and the same night sky. But an invisible, insurmountable wall divides them. It is a fragile balance, held together by force and fear, waiting for the slightest spark to ignite it. Slowly, imperceptibly, the deep black of the sky begins to soften in the east. The stars closest to the horizon start to fade, retreating before the approaching dawn. The sleepers stir in their beds, sensing the inevitable return of the sun and the labor it brings. Another day in Egypt is about to begin, seemingly just like the thousands of days that have come before it. But far away, beyond the reach of the Pharaoh's guards, the desert is not empty. A solitary figure is making his way across the rocky terrain, his staff rhythmically striking the ground with each deliberate step. Moses is returning. He carries no weapons, commands no army, and possesses no earthly riches. He brings only a message and a power that the mighty stone gods of Egypt have never encountered. As the first grey light of morning touches the peak of the highest pyramid, the quiet of the night finally breaks. The birds begin their morning song along the riverbanks, and the kingdom awakens. Let yourself rest in this final moment of peace before the sun rises fully, and the greatest story of liberation the world has ever known begins to unfold. The sun rises slowly over the jagged mountains of the Sinai Peninsula, casting long purple shadows across the barren rock. Out here, in the deep wilderness, the silence is so profound that it almost hums in the ears. The only sound is the rhythmic, steady crunch of sandals against the dry, unforgiving earth. A solitary figure is making his way downward, leaving the high desert behind and walking toward the horizon where the sky meets the sand. This man is Moses, a shepherd who has spent the last 40 years tending flocks in the quiet valleys of Midian. His face is weathered by decades of sun and wind, deeply lined with the wisdom of a life lived close to nature. His hands are rough and strong, gripping a simple wooden staff that has guided countless sheep to safety. Yet, this humble staff is now the anchor to a destiny he could never have imagined. As he walks, his mind drifts back to the life he left behind so long ago. He remembers the grand halls of the Pharaoh, the smell of exotic spices, and the cool touch of silk against his skin. He had walked those corridors as a prince of Egypt, raised in the very heart of the empire. But he also remembers the suffering of his true people, the Israelites, a memory that eventually drove him away into the lonely expanse of the desert. Now he is returning to the place of his youth, carrying a burden far heavier than anything he has ever known. The memory of the burning bush still glows brightly in his mind. He can still hear the voice that spoke from the unconsuming fire, a voice that carried the weight of eternity. It had called him by name, shattering his quiet life and commanding him to stand before the most powerful ruler on earth. He is not entirely alone on this daunting journey. In the vastness of the desert, he is met by his older brother, Aaron. Their reunion is quiet and profound, a coming together of two men bound by blood and a shared divine purpose. They embrace under the wide, open sky, finding strength in each other's presence. Aaron, who has lived among their suffering people, brings news of their sorrow, fueling the fire of their mission. Together, the two men walk side by side, their paces matching in a steady, determined rhythm. They speak in hushed tones, going over the words they must say and the signs they must perform. But mostly, they walk in silence, letting the vastness of the landscape absorb their fears and anxieties. With every mile they cover, the harsh terrain begins to soften, giving way to the subtle signs of approaching water. A change in the wind brings the faint, familiar scent of the river delta. The air grows slightly more humid, and patches of resilient green scrub begin to appear among the rocks. In the distance, rising like a mirage from the shimmering heat of the desert floor, they can see the faint outline of the great Egyptian monuments. The journey through the wilderness is coming to an end, and the threshold of the empire lies just ahead. They pause on a low ridge, looking down at the fertile land spreading out before them. The Nile winds its way through the green fields like a dark ribbon, beautiful and serene. It is a breathtaking sight, a land of immense wealth and power, guarded by an army that has never known defeat. And yet, these two shepherds carry with them a quiet confidence, knowing that the power they represent is far older than the stone pyramids below. As the evening sun begins to sink lower in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of copper and gold, they set up a small camp. A modest fire is built, offering warmth against the incoming desert chill. Tomorrow, they will enter the bustling city and demand an audience with the Pharaoh. But tonight, they rest by the glowing embers, finding a deep inner peace in the calm before the coming storm. Close your eyes and imagine the gentle crackle of their small campfire. Feel the cool evening breeze sweeping down from the mountains, bringing the quiet promise of a new dawn. The world is still, gathering its breath, waiting for the words that will change the course of history forever. Rest now, in this quiet space between the desert and the throne. The massive bronze doors of the royal palace swing open with a deep, echoing resonance. Inside, the air is immediately different, completely removed from the dust and the blinding heat of the city streets. It is remarkably cool here, sheltered by walls of thick limestone that rise high into the vaulted ceiling. The long, expansive corridors are lined with towering pillars, carved to resemble bundles of lotus reeds, painted in rich hues of lapis lazuli and vibrant ochre. A heavy, sweet fragrance hangs in the air, a complex blend of burning myrrh, cedarwood, and delicate floral oils. Sunlight filters down through small, high windows, catching the dust motes and turning them into slow-moving flakes of gold. Walking down this hallway feels like stepping into the heart of a mountain, a sanctuary perfectly designed to make every visitor feel incredibly small. At the far end of the hall, resting upon a raised dais of polished obsidian, sits the ruler of the known world. The Pharaoh is a vision of absolute, unquestioned authority. He wears the double crown of Egypt, a striking symbol of his dominion over both the upper and lower lands. Around his neck rests a broad collar of intricate gold and precious gems, catching the ambient light with every subtle movement he makes. His face is an unreadable mask of calm detachment, the face of a man who believes he is not merely a king, but a living god. Approaching this magnificent throne are two men who could not be more out of place. Moses and Aaron walk slowly across the gleaming stone floors, their sandals leaving faint traces of desert dust in their wake. They wear the simple, rough-spun wool of shepherds, a stark and jarring contrast to the sheer pleated linens of the courtiers and guards who watch them in silent disbelief. Yet, despite their humble appearance, There is no hesitation in their step, and their heads are held high. As they come to a halt before the dais, a profound silence falls over the vast throne room. It is a heavy, expectant quiet, broken only by the distant, soft murmur of water from a hidden courtyard fountain. The courtiers hold their breath, waiting to see how the Pharaoh will react to these uninvited guests. Moses raises his eyes, looking directly into the face of the man who holds the lives of thousands in his hands. When Moses speaks, his voice does not echo with anger or shout with aggression. Instead, it is steady, clear, and carries a quiet, grounded strength that seems to fill the enormous room. He delivers the message he was given in the wilderness, speaking the words of a God that this grand court has never acknowledged. "Let my people go," he says, "so that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." The Pharaoh does not move. For a long, lingering moment, he simply studies the two older men standing before him, his expression completely unchanged. When he finally replies, his tone is smooth, confident, and dripping with a cold, dismissive pride. He asks who this Lord is, that he should obey such a command. He states with absolute finality that he does not know this God, and he will not let the people go. The refusal hangs in the air, a chilling breeze passing through the warm, incense-filled room. There is no argument, no grand theatrical display, only the quiet drawing of a line in the sand. The Pharaoh dismisses them with a slight wave of his hand, turning his attention back to the matters of his empire. To him, this brief encounter is nothing more than the buzzing of a fly, a minor annoyance easily swatted away and forgotten. Moses and Aaron turn and begin the long, quiet walk back down the massive corridor. The golden sunlight at the doorway seems impossibly far away. The first attempt has failed, just as they were warned it would, and the hearts of the powerful remain hardened like the very stones of the palace. But as they step out of the shadows and back into the fading warmth of the late afternoon, the air feels different. The gentle evening wind brushes past them, carrying the distant scent of the river. The quiet tension of the throne room fades, replaced by the calming, rhythmic sounds of the city preparing for the evening. Close your eyes and listen to the soft wind rustling the palm leaves. A clash of wills has quietly begun, but for now, the evening brings a gentle pause, allowing the mind to rest before the waters of the Nile begin to change. Dawn breaks gently over the great Nile, unveiling a breathtaking masterpiece of morning light and rolling mist. The air is still and remarkably cool, carrying the sweet, earthy aroma of damp soil and ancient papyrus reeds. As the sun slowly peaks over the eastern horizon, it paints the surface of the mighty river in soft shades of pearlescent pink and shimmering gold. Flocks of white egrets stand perfectly still in the shallow waters, their reflections mirrored flawlessly on the glassy surface. It is a moment of profound, untouched serenity, a daily rebirth that the people of Egypt have worshipped since the dawn of their civilization. Along the manicured banks of the royal gardens, the Pharaoh begins his daily procession to the water's edge. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace, surrounded by a quiet entourage of priests and trusted advisors. Their fine linen garments brush softly against the stone pathways, a rhythmic whispering sound that blends with the gentle lapping of the river. He comes to pay homage to the Nile, the divine source of his empire's immense wealth and unyielding power. In this early hour, the world belongs entirely to him, peaceful and perfectly ordered. Yet, waiting quietly among the tall green reeds, two solitary figures stand in stark contrast to the royal splendor. Moses and Aaron have arrived long before the sun, their rough wool cloaks damp with the morning dew. They do not bow or turn away as the Pharaoh approaches, but instead stand as still as the ancient stones of the deep desert. There is no visible anger in their posture, only a heavy, sorrowful resignation for what is about to unfold. They are the quiet messengers of an impending storm, holding their ground in the soft morning light. The Pharaoh pauses at the edge of the water, his eyes catching the sight of the two shepherds. A fleeting look of annoyance crosses his face, a silent irritation that this perfect morning has been interrupted. Moses speaks quietly, his voice carrying effortlessly across the calm surface of the water. He repeats the demand of his God, a gentle but firm request that has already been dismissed time and time again. The Pharaoh simply turns his back, refusing them once more, confident in the eternal protection of his majestic river. With a slow, deliberate motion, Aaron steps forward and raises his wooden staff high above his head. The morning breeze seems to suddenly stop, and a heavy, breathless silence falls over the entire riverbank. For a single, suspended heartbeat, the entire world appears to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. Then, with a heavy, decisive swing, the wooden staff comes down and strikes the surface of the water. A hollow, echoing thud rings out, a sound that seems far too loud for a simple piece of wood hitting the gentle current. At the exact point of impact, a dark, unnatural shadow blooms beneath the surface of the water. It does not splash or violently erupt, but rather bleeds outward like a thick, heavy ink dropped into a clear glass. The shimmering blue and gold of the morning light is instantly swallowed by a deep, velvety crimson. It is a slow, mesmerizing transformation, a terrifying beauty that captivates the eye, even as the mind naturally recoils. The lifeblood of Egypt is quietly, irrevocably changing its very nature. The thick red tide creeps outward, moving steadily against the current and spreading across the vast width of the river. Where the water was once transparent and bright, it now runs dark and heavy, swirling with an ominous, sluggish grace. The transformation moves downstream, an unstoppable blanket of deep red that consumes every ripple and wave. The priests and advisors watch in paralyzed silence, unable to comprehend the impossible sight unfolding right beneath their feet. The gentle, life-giving river has become a slow-moving vein of dark, rich crimson. A sudden, eerie quiet descends upon the natural world surrounding the water's edge. The flocks of white egrets take flight in absolute unison, their wings beating silently as they abandon the water and disappear into the sky. The silver fish, usually darting playfully beneath the surface, begin to struggle as the heavy liquid robs them of their breath. The joyful morning song of the marsh birds is completely extinguished, replaced by a profound and heavy stillness. Nature itself is retreating from the shores, leaving behind a landscape painted in quiet, tragic sorrow. The cool, earthy scent of the morning is slowly replaced by something heavy and incredibly metallic. It is the unmistakable, sharp aroma of copper and decay, hanging thickly in the rapidly warming air. The breeze that once brought relief now carries a suffocating weight, a sensory reminder of the devastation that has just been unleashed. Servants who had come down to the river to fill their clay jars drop them in shock, the pottery shattering soundlessly on the soft mud. The source of all life in the vast desert has suddenly become a symbol of profound, unimaginable loss. The dark phenomenon does not stop at the banks of the main river. The thick, crimson tide creeps silently into the irrigation canals, spreading like a web of dark veins across the green agricultural fields. It seeps into the wooden buckets left by the community wells and fills the stone purification jars within the grandest temples. There is no escape from the transformation, no hidden reserve of clear water left untouched anywhere in the region. The entire kingdom, from the poorest mud brick home to the Pharaoh's private chambers, is united in this sudden, inescapable thirst. Despite the overwhelming evidence flowing right before his eyes, the Pharaoh's heart remains entirely unmoved. He watches the heavy red water move past his feet, his face set in a permanent mask of stubborn, icy pride. He turns away and walks slowly back toward the safety of his towering stone palace, refusing to acknowledge the power that has just humbled his greatest god. His court follows him in total silence, leaving the river behind as it continues its dark, sluggish journey toward the distant sea. The great standoff has escalated dramatically, but the golden throne refuses to bend even a fraction. As the long, exhausting day finally comes to an end, the setting sun casts a strange, copper glow over the transformed landscape. The crimson river reflects the fading light, glowing ominously like a bed of dying embers in the descending twilight. The vibrant, bustling life of the Nile has been entirely replaced by a haunting, tragic stillness that covers the land. The air cools down once more, but the comforting sounds of the water lapping against the shore are now heavy, thick, and muted. It is a night of profound, quiet reflection for the millions of people living across the expanse of Egypt. Far away in the eastern delta, in the land of Goshen, the Israelites sit quietly in their homes, listening to the heavy silence outside. They are physically untouched by this specific sorrow, yet they feel the immense weight of the divine power moving through the world. The ancient stars emerge slowly in the darkening sky, shining down on a landscape forever altered by a single strike of a shepherd's staff. It is a perfect moment to breathe deeply, to feel the vast distance of history, and to find calm in the quiet spaces between the great storms. Let the slow, heavy tide flow softly out of your imagination, washing away the tensions and worries of your own day. Let your mind rest now, enveloped safely in the quiet, starry night of the ancient desert world. The entire world is taking a long, deep breath, pausing in the shadows before the next chapter of this grand story begins to unfold. The evening air is beautifully cool, the shadows are stretching long, and the distant past offers a safe, peaceful refuge for your wandering thoughts. Drift away smoothly on the gentle currents of time, knowing comfortably that the morning will always bring a new guiding light. Rest peacefully, and let the profound quiet of the ages carry you down into a deep, restoring calm. 7 long, exhausting days have passed since the great river first transformed beneath the weight of the shepherd's staff. Slowly, almost mercifully, the heavy crimson tide begins to clear, washing away into the vast expanse of the northern sea. The water returning to the riverbed is clear and cool once more, bringing a collective sigh of relief from the parched and weary cities. People return to the muddy banks, cautiously dipping their clay jars into the life-giving currents. It feels as though a terrible nightmare has finally broken, allowing the empire to breathe again. But the relief is fleeting, and the quiet of the ancient world is about to be broken in a completely different way. As the sun sets on the newly restored Nile, a subtle, rhythmic sound begins to rise from the damp reeds along the water's edge. It starts as a single, low croak, echoing faintly in the stillness of the twilight. Then another voice joins in, followed by a dozen more, until the marshlands are alive with a low, vibrating hum. It is a sound familiar to anyone who lives near the water, the natural, nocturnal song of the river frogs awakening in the dark. Tonight, however, the chorus does not stay confined to the peaceful boundaries of the muddy shores. The sound swells, growing deeper and more resonant with every passing minute, expanding into a deafening, inescapable pulse. Beneath the pale light of the moon, the muddy banks begin to shift and ripple with life. Thousands, then hundreds of thousands, of slick, green amphibians pull themselves up from the water's edge. They move with a single, relentless purpose, hopping silently across the damp soil and turning their gaze toward the sleeping cities of Egypt. The invasion is completely quiet in its movement, but overwhelming in its sheer, unimaginable volume. A carpet of small, glistening bodies flows over the agricultural terraces, covering the newly sprouted green fields in a moving blanket of shadow. They spill over the stone embankments, their wet, webbed feet making soft, pattering sounds against the dry cobblestones of the outer streets. There is no malice in their advance, only an unnatural, divine compulsion that drives them forward into the domain of mankind. The boundaries between the wild river and the civilized world are completely erased in a matter of hours. Inside the humble mud brick homes of the city outskirts, the sleeping families begin to stir uneasily. The low vibrational croaking has grown so loud that it rattles the very walls of their modest dwellings. A sleepy child reaches out into the darkness, only to feel the cool, slick skin of a frog resting gently upon the woven sleeping mats. They are everywhere. They sit perched upon the unlit clay ovens, nestle deep within the wooden kneading bowls, and gather in the dark corners of every room. The phenomenon does not spare the wealthy or the powerful, completely ignoring the high walls of the noble estates. In the grand palaces, the frogs hop freely across the polished marble floors, leaving small, damp footprints trailing in the moonlight. They splash carelessly into the decorative indoor fountains, turning the tranquil, musical waters into a chaotic, churning mess. Servants rush frantically through the incense-filled corridors, sweeping the creatures away with palm fronds. But for every one removed, a dozen more arrive to take its place. The luxurious sanctuary of the elite is entirely breached. Even the Pharaoh himself finds no peace in his towering, heavily guarded chambers. He wakes to the suffocating chorus of the amphibians, the rhythmic noise vibrating through the very frame of his gilded bed. When he pulls back his fine linen sheets, he finds them hiding in the folds of the fabric, their bulbous eyes staring back at him in the dim light of the oil lamps. The supreme ruler, a man who commands massive armies and holds absolute power over millions, is rendered completely powerless against this bizarre creeping tide. The absurdity of the situation is matched only by its profound psychological toll. For the ancient Egyptians, the frog is normally a symbol of fertility and life, often associated with the goddess who protects childbirth. But this magnificent blessing has been twisted into a relentless, suffocating burden. The sheer abundance of life has become a curse, turning the simple act of walking across a room into a delicate, disturbing challenge. Every footstep must be measured, every shadowed corner inspected, as the world is completely consumed by this living, breathing sea. The gods of Egypt are being quietly turned against the very people who worship them. The unending noise becomes a physical weight, pressing down on the minds of every man, woman, and child. There is no way to escape the deep, guttural croaking that fills the air from the darkest hours of midnight to the burning heat of the afternoon sun. It is a hypnotic, maddening rhythm that prevents any true rest, wearing away at the patience and sanity of the empire. The proud citizens of the golden cities are brought low, wandering through their homes with exhausted eyes, surrounded by a pestilence they cannot fight or control. Desperation finally forces the Pharaoh to break his stoic silence and summon the humble shepherds back to the palace. His pride is visibly fractured, his confident posture replaced by the haggard movements of a man deprived of sleep. He looks at Moses not with anger, but with a weary, pleading desperation. "Pray to your Lord," he asks, "and take these creatures away from my people." It is the very first crack in the foundation of his stubborn resolve, a momentary surrender to a power he still refuses to fully understand. Moses nods slowly, his face reflecting a quiet, solemn acceptance of the Pharaoh's plea. He sets a specific time for the plague to end, ensuring that the ruler will know this is not a random act of nature, but the precise work of a divine hand. He turns and leaves the palace, walking back out into the chaotic, noisy streets of the capital. The promise has been made, but the heavy, rhythmic chorus of the frogs continues to echo through the night, a constant reminder of the consequences of a hardened heart. As the final hours of the plague tick away, imagine the overwhelming sound beginning to slowly, gradually fade. The deep vibrations soften, losing their frantic intensity and settling back into a more natural, distant rhythm. The creatures begin their quiet retreat, instinctively moving away from the stone houses and returning to the muddy shores of the great river. The oppressive, suffocating presence lifts, leaving behind a profound and absolute silence that feels incredibly heavy after days of constant noise. The air clears, and the people of Egypt finally close their eyes and sink into a deep, dreamless sleep. There is a profound beauty in the stillness that follows a great disruption. The tall stone pillars of the temples, which had echoed for days with the maddening sounds of the swarm, now stand in quiet, solemn dignity. The moon casts long, uninterrupted shadows across the plazas, highlighting the vast, empty spaces that have finally been reclaimed by the night. It is a moment of pure, undisturbed tranquility, a necessary pause in the grand, sweeping narrative of liberation. The people breathe deeply, savoring the simple, unnoticed luxury of a quiet, peaceful room. Let that same stillness wrap itself around you now, completely and entirely. Just as the ancient cities found their rest after the chaotic chorus of the night, you too can find your sanctuary in the quiet hours. The relentless noise of the waking world has retreated, leaving you with nothing but the soft, steady rhythm of your own heart. Sink deeper into your resting place, supported by the silent, eternal earth beneath you. The past is only a story. The future has not yet arrived. And in this perfect, suspended moment, everything is exactly as it should be. Allow your thoughts to drift away, floating gently on the calm, silent surface of the dark river. The ancient empire is slumbering under the watchful gaze of the bright desert stars, caught in a fragile pause between the storms. Breathe in the cool, silent air, and let the heavy weight of the day completely vanish into the darkness. Rest securely in this quiet haven, knowing that the sands of time continue to turn, slow and steady, carrying you gently toward a peaceful dawn. Sleep well, and let the echoes of history gently fade away. The heavy, croaking chorus of the frogs has finally faded into a distant memory, leaving the grand cities of Egypt bathed in a profound and exhausted silence. The muddy banks of the great Nile lie undisturbed under the intense heat of the midday sun, baking into hard, cracked patterns of dry clay. The people of the empire have swept their homes clean, opening their wooden shutters to allow the fresh, dry desert breeze to clear the stagnant air from their rooms. For a brief, fleeting moment, it feels as though the natural balance of the world has been fully restored. The Golden Empire draws a deep, collective breath, desperate to return to the comfortable rhythms of its ancient daily life. In the cool, shaded halls of the royal palace, the pharaoh relaxes upon his polished obsidian throne. With the immediate threat gone, the weary desperation that had clouded his judgment quickly evaporates, replaced once again by the familiar warmth of his own absolute pride. He looks out over his magnificent courtyards, watching the servants carry trays of fresh figs and cool wine, convincing himself that his power remains entirely unbroken. The promises he made in the dark, sleepless hours of the night are conveniently forgotten, swept away like loose sand in the wind. His heart hardens like the sun-baked clay of the riverbank, stubbornly refusing to yield to the shepherds and their unseen God. This time, there is no formal warning delivered to the towering stone palace, and no quiet conversation by the water's edge. Moses and Aaron simply walk out into the vast open plains that surround the bustling capital city. They stand beneath the blinding glare of the afternoon sun, surrounded by the infinite, sweeping expanse of the Egyptian desert. The sand here is incredibly fine, ground into dust by thousands of years of relentless wind and scorching heat. It is the very foundation of the empire, the ancient earth upon which every temple, pyramid, and humble home has been built. With a calm and deliberate motion, Aaron steps forward and raises his wooden staff. He brings it down with a firm, solid strike, striking not the water, but the dry, powdery dust of the earth beneath his feet. A small puff of fine sand rises into the air around his sandals, catching the bright sunlight for a brief moment before settling back to the ground. At first, nothing else seems to happen, and the vast desert landscape remains completely perfectly still. But then, a subtle, unsettling shift begins to occur across the entire surface of the land. The top layer of the desert dust begins to tremble, moving with a strange, unnatural vibration that has nothing to do with the wind. It looks as though a low, dark mist is slowly rising from the ground, creeping over the sand dunes and spilling into the stone streets of the cities. As the mist rises higher, it becomes terrifyingly clear that this is not sand, but life. The very dust of the earth is transforming, taking flight in the form of millions upon millions of tiny winged insects. A swarm of gnats, so dense it obscures the lower half of the horizon, sweeps silently across the Golden Kingdom. Unlike the overwhelming noise of the frogs, this invasion is eerily, dreadfully quiet. The tiny creatures make almost no sound as they cloud the air, appearing like a heavy, shifting veil of grey shadows. They land softly on the skin of every man, woman, and child, bringing an immediate, inescapable wave of relentless irritation. The gentle, cooling breeze of the late afternoon offers no relief, only carrying more of the biting dust into the open windows and busy marketplaces. The simple act of walking outdoors becomes a torment, as the swarms cling to the fine linen garments and settle into the hair of the people. The livestock in the fields suffer alongside their masters, tossing their heavy heads and stomping their hooves in vain against the invisible cloud. Beautiful, muscular horses in the royal stables pace restlessly, their glossy coats covered in a fine, moving layer of dark specks. The majestic oxen, usually so placid and steady while pulling the heavy plows, low out in sheer frustration unable to shake the constant, crawling sensation. It is a profound humiliation, a quiet torture that strips away all dignity and leaves nothing but a frantic, scratching desperation in its wake. The immense power of the Egyptian military and the grand architecture of the cities are completely useless against an enemy so incredibly small. Inside the opulent walls of the palace, the Pharaoh demands his finest magicians to step forward and recreate this phenomenon, just as they had done before. The learned men chant their ancient incantations, throwing their secret powders into the braziers and striking the stone floors with their own carved staffs. But the dust of the palace floors simply settles back into harmless dirt, refusing to obey their commands. They stand before the throne, humbled and scratching at their own tormented skin, finally admitting the truth of the situation. They look at the Pharaoh with fearful, exhausted eyes and whisper, "This is the finger of God." Yet, even as his own trusted advisors concede defeat, the Pharaoh remains stubbornly seated upon his high throne. His pride is a fortress entirely walled off from reason, refusing to bend, even as the tiny creatures swarm around his golden crown. He dismisses the magicians with an angry wave of his hand, choosing to endure the relentless physical discomfort rather than surrender his divine authority. The standoff deepens, the invisible line drawn in the sand growing thicker and more dangerous with every passing hour. The suffering of his people is simply a cost he is perfectly willing to pay in order to preserve his flawless image. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, the swarms show absolutely no sign of retreating. The fading evening light filters through the dense clouds of insects, casting a strange shimmering haze over the grand monuments and the humble mud brick homes alike. The usual lively evening chatter in the village squares is replaced by the quiet, frustrated sounds of people retreating indoors, sealing their windows as tightly as possible. But the tiny creatures find their way through the smallest cracks and the finest woven screens, ensuring that no room in all of Egypt is truly safe. The night brings a heavy darkness, but completely fails to provide its usual comforting rest. Imagine observing this ancient struggle from a vast, safe distance, removed entirely from the heat and the irritation of the moment. You are a quiet observer of history, floating above the magnificent troubled kingdom as it wrestles with forces far beyond its control. The tiny, frustrating details of their suffering begin to blur, blending into the larger, sweeping tapestry of the desert night. Focus instead on the immovable, eternal stones of the pyramids that remain completely untouched by the chaos unfolding at their base. They stand as silent reminders that all storms, no matter how persistent or irritating, eventually pass away into nothingness. Let your own breathing become slow, deep, and deeply rhythmic, anchoring you securely in the peace of the present moment. If there are any small worries or lingering frustrations from your day buzzing around your mind, simply picture them as tiny specks of dust. Allow a gentle, cooling breeze from the deep desert to sweep through your thoughts, carrying those tiny irritations far away into the dark night. Watch them scatter and disappear, leaving your mind clear, expansive, and perfectly calm. You are completely safe, protected from the swirling winds of the past. The quiet of the starry sky eventually claims the ancient land, settling over the exhausted cities like a soft, heavy blanket. The people of the empire sleep fitfully, dreaming of clear skies and the soothing, cool waters of the restored river. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and a darkening of the air, but for now, the grand story rests silently in the shadows. Let yourself sink deeper into the comforting embrace of the night, surrendering fully to the quiet stillness. Drift peacefully into a deep and restorative sleep, guided by the timeless, turning stars. The golden sun climbs higher into the pale morning sky, casting its unyielding light over a kingdom that has grown incredibly weary. The fine, irritating dust of the earth has finally settled back into the ground, but the memory of the relentless swarms still lingers in the minds of the people. There is no joyful morning song from the workers in the fields, and the bustling marketplaces of the grand cities remain uncharacteristically subdued. The empire is moving with a slow, exhausted lethargy, like a great ship caught in the stagnant, heavy waters of a windless sea. It is a morning of quiet apprehension, a collective holding of breath as the people wait to see what the shepherds will do next. Moses does not hide in the shadows or wait for a royal summons to approach the golden throne. As the Pharaoh makes his way toward the riverbanks once more, wrapped in the finest white linens and flanked by his silent guards, the humble shepherd stands directly in his path. The contrast between the two men has never been more striking. One is a ruler adorned in gold and lapis lazuli, visibly strained by the weight of a crumbling reality. The other is a man of the desert, leaning calmly on a simple wooden staff, carrying a quiet authority that cannot be shaken or ignored. The words Moses speaks are direct and carry a chilling, unmistakable finality. He delivers the command of his God, demanding the release of the people, but this time he adds a profound and unprecedented condition. He warns that if the Pharaoh refuses, the air itself will fill with thick, devouring swarms of flies. But the true power of the message lies in what will not happen. Moses declares that the land of Goshen, the humble dwelling place of the Israelites, will be completely spared from this coming darkness. A protective boundary will be drawn, an invisible wall of peace that no plague can cross, proving that this is not random nature, but deliberate, divine design. The Pharaoh, trapped within the heavy walls of his own stubborn pride, simply turns his head away, refusing to acknowledge the warning. He returns to his palace, convinced that his thick stone walls and elite guards can protect him from any worldly nuisance. But as the midday heat reaches its absolute peak, the bright blue sky above the capital city begins to change. A dark, bruising shadow appears on the horizon, moving with a terrifying, unnatural speed across the desert plains. It is accompanied by a low, vibrating hum that quickly builds into a deafening, overwhelming roar. Millions upon millions of thick, heavy flies descend upon the grand cities of Egypt like a suffocating black shroud. Unlike the fine, powdery gnats, these creatures are large, aggressive, and completely inescapable. They pour into the open windows of the palaces, blackening the beautifully painted walls and covering the intricately carved furniture. They swarm over the food on the royal tables, ruin the offerings left in the sacred temples, and fill the air with a maddening, relentless buzzing sound. The sky is completely blotted out, turning the bright, golden afternoon into a strange, terrifying twilight of shifting shadows. The magnificent gardens of the elite are completely destroyed as the swarms cover the leaves of the fruit trees and the delicate petals of the lotus flowers. The people are driven indoors, sealing every crack and crevice with damp clay, yet still the flies find their way inside. It is an invasion that completely ruins the land, paralyzing the daily life of the entire kingdom. The great, powerful empire is brought to an absolute standstill, held hostage in the dark by a creeping, flying tide of relentless insects. Fear and frustration mingle in the suffocating heat of the sealed, airless rooms. But far away, in the eastern delta, a completely different reality is unfolding in the humble land of Goshen. Here, the sky remains a brilliant, unbroken shade of peaceful blue. The afternoon breeze sweeps gently through the simple mud brick homes, carrying the sweet scent of blooming desert flowers and the fresh water of the nearby canals. Not a single fly crosses the invisible boundary drawn by the divine hand. The Israelites step outside into the warm sunlight, looking out toward the distant, darkened horizon with a sense of profound, quiet awe. Imagine the incredible serenity of that protected space. Children play freely in the dusty streets, their joyful laughter entirely uninterrupted by the chaos consuming the rest of the world. The sheep and goats graze calmly on the green pastures, pulling quietly at the grass under the watchful, relaxed eyes of the shepherds. There is an overwhelming sense of safety here, a deep, comforting knowledge that they are seen, protected, and entirely separate from the storm. It is a sanctuary of absolute peace, carved perfectly out of the surrounding chaos. Back in the suffocating darkness of the royal palace, the Pharaoh finally reaches his breaking point. The constant, maddening roar of the flies has shattered his golden composure, leaving him frantic and utterly exhausted. He furiously summons Moses and Aaron back to the throne room, his voice echoing with a desperate urgency. He tries to negotiate, offering them permission to sacrifice to their God, but insisting they remain within the borders of the land. But Moses stands firm, knowing that half a promise is no promise at all, and insists they must journey fully into the vast wilderness. Unable to endure another moment of the dark, buzzing torment, the Pharaoh completely surrenders to the demand. He promises to let the people go, begging Moses to pray for the swarms to be lifted from his ruined kingdom. Moses agrees, but issues a gentle warning, reminding the powerful ruler not to deal deceitfully once the relief arrives. With a quiet nod, the shepherd turns and walks out of the blackened, chaotic palace, stepping back out into the swarming, shadowed streets. The prayer is offered, and the turning point of the day begins. The shift is sudden and incredibly absolute. A strong, decisive wind sweeps down from the northern mountains, catching the dark clouds of flies and carrying them swiftly away. The heavy, maddening hum completely fades, replaced by the rushing sound of the cleansing breeze. Within mere moments, the sky is clear again, and the bright, golden light of the afternoon sun spills back over the exhausted stone cities. Not a single fly remains in all the land of Egypt, a sudden emptiness that is almost as shocking as the invasion itself. The relief washes over the empire like a cool rain, but unfortunately, it does not reach the deepest parts of the Pharaoh's heart. As the clean air fills his palace once more, and the golden sunlight warms his skin, the memory of his suffering quickly fades into the background. His pride, bruised but not entirely broken, aggressively reasserts its dominance over his mind. He looks at the clear sky and convinces himself that the danger has permanently passed. And once again, against all reason and mercy, he violently hardens his heart and stubbornly refuses to let the people go. The sun eventually sets, bringing a close to one of the most exhausting and bewildering days the great empire has ever seen. The evening shadows stretch incredibly long across the sand, softening the harsh edges of the monuments and temples. The night air is beautifully cool and entirely clear, carrying only the gentle scents of the distant river and the dry desert earth. It is a night of profound, necessary rest, a quiet space to recover from the intense trials of the waking hours. The people close their eyes, holding on to the comforting silence as if it were a precious, fragile treasure. Let that same beautiful silence wash over you completely right now. Imagine yourself safely inside that invisible boundary of absolute peace, completely protected from the buzzing worries and chaotic swarms of the outside world. The air around you is perfectly still, pure, and incredibly calming. Take a deep, slow breath in, feeling the cool, refreshing air. Fill your lungs and let it out with a long, satisfying sigh. Every muscle in your body can safely let go of its tension, sinking comfortably into the quiet sanctuary of the present moment. There is absolutely nothing you need to fight against, and nothing you need to figure out tonight. The great storms of history are safely locked away in the distant past, leaving you with nothing but this deep, expansive calm. Let your thoughts slow down to a gentle rolling rhythm, matching the steady, peaceful flow of the ancient river under the stars. You are perfectly safe, entirely relaxed, and completely ready to drift away. Sleep peacefully, and let the quiet embrace of the night hold you securely until the dawn. The dawn arrives with a gentle, golden light, sweeping softly across the vast and fertile plains of the Egyptian delta. The air is finally clear, entirely free from the dark, buzzing swarms that had so recently suffocated the magnificent kingdom. A heavy, sparkling dew rests gently upon the tall blades of green grass, catching the early morning sunlight and turning the sprawling fields into a vast sea of shimmering diamonds. It looks, for all the world, like a morning of perfect, undisturbed peace. But history is rarely still for long, and the quiet calm of this beautiful sunrise is merely the brief pause before another sorrowful chapter begins. To truly understand the ancient empire of Egypt, you must understand the deep, vital connection it shared with the animal kingdom. While the grand monuments were carved from unyielding stone, the true foundation of the nation's immense wealth and power walked on four legs. In the royal stables, the majestic horses were groomed to a brilliant shine, their powerful muscular frames representing the terrifying speed of the Pharaoh's elite chariots. Out in the vast, open pastures, thousands of sturdy oxen pulled the heavy wooden plows through the rich, dark soil of the riverbanks. And wandering the dusty paths of the desert edges were the patient, enduring camels, carrying the lifeblood of trade across the endless seas of sand. These animals were more than just tools of labor or symbols of immense wealth. They were deeply revered, and in many cases considered deeply sacred. The gentle cows and the powerful bulls were earthly representations of the very gods the Egyptians worshipped, their lives intertwined with the spiritual heartbeat of the kingdom. The sounds of their lowing in the twilight, the rhythmic stamping of their hooves, and the soft jingling of their harnesses were the deeply comforting, everyday music of the empire. They were a constant, reassuring presence, a living testament to the perfect balance and enduring prosperity of the Golden Land. It is against this backdrop of reverence and reliance that the humble shepherd steps forward once again. Moses returns to the towering stone palace, his demeanor calm, steady, and entirely free of anger or malice. He carries the heavy weight of a tragic message, a warning that strikes directly at the heart of Egypt's pride and earthly security. He speaks clearly to the Pharaoh, declaring that if the people are not allowed to go, the hand of the Lord will fall upon the livestock in the fields. He speaks of a severe pestilence, a sweeping illness that will claim the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds and the flocks. But once again, he draws a sharp, undeniable line in the sand, promising that the animals of the Israelites will remain entirely safe and completely untouched. The Pharaoh listens from his elevated throne, his face set in a rigid, immovable mask of stubborn defiance. He cannot bring himself to yield to a man who wears the rough, woven wool of a desert nomad. The warning is given a specific timeline. Moses states that this profound loss will occur on the very next day. The ruler has the entire afternoon and a long, quiet night to reconsider his path, to bend his pride and save the magnificent creatures that sustain his empire. But as the sun sets and the stars emerge over the silent fields, the Pharaoh's heart remains locked behind heavy, unbreakable doors of arrogance. When the next day breaks, there is no dramatic storm, no darkening of the sky, and no terrifying, overwhelming swarm. Instead, the fifth plague arrives with a deeply melancholic, incredibly tragic quiet. It moves invisibly across the gentle morning breeze, sweeping over the lush green pastures and into the shaded stone stalls of the royal stables. There is no panic, no frantic struggling against an unseen enemy. The majestic animals simply begin to slow down, overcome by an incredibly heavy, unshakable lethargy that pulls them gently toward the earth. In the fields, the great oxen stop mid-step, their heavy heads bowing low as their massive legs finally give way. They sink softly into the tall grass, letting out long, slow breaths as they close their large, dark eyes. In the finely manicured stables, the proud, spirited horses lose their fiery energy, resting their chins upon the wooden gates before quietly collapsing onto the fresh straw. The resilient camels in the desert caravans kneel down in the soft sand, just as they would for a night's rest, but they simply do not rise again. It is a peaceful, painless passing, a gentle falling asleep that nonetheless breaks the hearts of the men and women who care for them. By the time the sun reaches its peak in the pale blue sky, an incredibly heavy, profound silence has fallen over the entire Egyptian countryside. The familiar, comforting symphony of the pastures has been completely extinguished. The fields are dotted with the still, lifeless forms of the magnificent herds, resting peacefully beneath the warming rays of the sun. The shepherds and farmers stand at the edges of their land, their hands covering their mouths in quiet, tearful disbelief. An unimaginable fortune, the very lifeblood of the agricultural empire, has vanished into the quiet embrace of eternity in a single, devastating morning. Desperate for any sign that the shepherd's warning was false, the Pharaoh immediately dispatches his fastest messengers to the eastern delta. They ride out to the humble, dusty land of Goshen, completely expecting to find the same tragic silence that has blanketed the rest of the kingdom. But as they crest the final sandy ridge, they are met with a sight that entirely shatters their understanding of the natural world. The pastures of the Israelites are vibrant and completely alive. The sheep graze peacefully, the donkeys bray in the warm air, and the cattle rest safely in the cool shade of the palm trees. Not a single animal belonging to the Israelites has fallen. The invisible wall of divine protection remains absolutely impenetrable, a stark, undeniable contrast to the profound devastation surrounding it. The messengers return to the grand palace, their heads bowed low as they deliver the heavy truth to the golden throne. The words of Moses have proven entirely true, and the evidence of a supreme unyielding power is now resting silently in every field of the Egyptian empire. It is a moment that calls out for deep reflection, for humility, and for an immediate change of heart. Yet, standing amidst the devastating reality of his own making, the Pharaoh chooses the path of resistance once more. The loss of the animals is a terrible, painful blow to his economy and his immense pride. But it is a loss he is still willing to absorb. He looks out from his high balconies over a kingdom that has grown painfully quiet, and he tightly clenches his jaw. His heart hardens like the dry, baked clay of the desert floor, refusing to let the captive people walk free into the wilderness. The heavy standoff continues, wrapped in the sorrowful stillness of the empty pastures. As evening approaches, the shadows stretch out long and thin across the silent golden fields. The wind whispers gently through the tall reeds by the riverbank, a soft, melancholic lullaby for a world that has lost a piece of its vibrant soul. It is a time for mourning, but also a time for quiet, profound reflection on the impermanence of all earthly things. The immense wealth of the greatest empire on earth was completely swept away in a few short hours, proving that true security is never found in the things we try so desperately to hold on to. There is a strange, empty peace that follows a great loss, a stillness that demands nothing but calm acceptance. Allow that deep, expansive stillness to gently enter your own mind right now. Imagine yourself walking slowly through those quiet, twilight pastures, surrounded by the cool evening air and the soft, fading light of the setting sun. The burdens and attachments of your waking life, the things you worry over and tightly hold on to, can be safely set down in the soft grass. You do not need to carry them through the night. Let them go, releasing your grip entirely, and feel the incredible lightness that washes over your shoulders and your chest. Breathe in the sweet, earthy scent of the cooling desert landscape, pulling the calm, steady air deep into your lungs. Exhale slowly, letting the long, drawn-out breath carry away any remaining tension, any lingering sadness, and any persistent fears. The ancient world is quietly going to sleep, wrapping itself in a blanket of dark, protective stars. There is absolutely nothing left to do, nowhere else to be, and no problems that need to be solved in this quiet hour. You are perfectly safe, entirely unburdened, and floating gently on the calm surface of a deep, restful peace. Let the heavy silence of the pastures become your own personal sanctuary. Drift further and further away from the noise of the day, sinking deeply into the soft, comforting embrace of your bed. The great dramatic stories of history continue to gently unfold in the shadows, but you are merely a peaceful observer, resting comfortably under the vast ancient sky. Allow your thoughts to softly fade into nothingness, like the golden light dissolving into the deep, violet night. Sleep now, and let the quiet, eternal stillness restore your weary soul. The heavy, melancholic stillness that followed the loss of the majestic herds continues to press down upon the vast Egyptian landscape. The grand pastures, once vibrant with life and movement, now lie incredibly empty beneath the vast, cloudless expanse of the pale desert sky. The air is perfectly still, holding on to the intense, dry heat of the midday sun, like water held in a deep clay basin. The entire kingdom feels as though it is holding its breath, trapped in a profound state of exhaustion and waiting. It is in this quiet, deeply uncomfortable pause that the next chapter of the ancient narrative begins to quietly unfold. Up until this moment, the immense power of the unseen God has struck the environment around the people. The great river was transformed, the muddy banks overflowed with life, the dust of the earth became a torment, and the wealth of the fields was entirely swept away. But as devastating as those trials were, they remained external, a safe distance away from the very bodies of the Egyptians. The grand monuments still stand, and the people themselves are physically whole. But the stubborn pride of the Golden Throne has demanded a much deeper, far more personal lesson. In the heat of the afternoon, Moses and Aaron are given a very specific, highly symbolic instruction. They walk quietly away from the royal palace, making their way toward the massive, smoldering brick kilns that dot the edges of the great cities. These deep, fiery pits are the very sites of the Israelites' bitter, back-breaking labor, the places where mud and straw are endlessly baked into the heavy building blocks of the empire. Moses reaches his weathered hands into the cold edges of a recently extinguished fire. He gathers 2 handfuls of the fine, dark soot, the physical residue of his people's centuries of suffering and captivity. With the dark ashes resting in his palms, the humble shepherd returns to the magnificent courtyards of the Pharaoh. He stands before the ruler of the known world, completely silent, offering no long speeches and shouting no dramatic warnings. With a sudden, swift motion, Moses throws the handfuls of fine black soot high into the warm afternoon air. The ashes do not simply fall back to the stone floor in a heavy clump. Instead, they seem to catch an invisible, rising current, bursting outward and dissolving into a vast, fine mist that is quickly carried away by the desert wind. The dark dust travels with terrifying, imperceptible speed across the entire expanse of the kingdom. It rides on the back of the gentle breezes, swirling through the grand avenues of the capital and sweeping over the roofs of the humble mud-brick villages. It is entirely invisible to the naked eye, appearing as nothing more than a trick of the shimmering afternoon light. As the invisible dust settles over the land, it gently brushes against the exposed skin of the people. At first, it feels like nothing more than the soft, natural touch of the warm wind, completely ignored by the busy citizens of the empire. But as the hours slowly pass, and the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, a strange, undeniable heat begins to build beneath the surface of the skin. It starts as a faint, localized warmth, a subtle throbbing sensation that quickly deepens into a profound, feverish ache. Slowly, aggressively, the skin begins to swell, turning an angry, vibrant red before breaking out into incredibly painful, festering boils. It is a severe, sudden affliction that sweeps through the population without warning, turning the simple act of wearing clothes or resting on a mat into a slow, agonizing challenge. The tragedy has finally crossed the threshold, moving from the fields directly onto the bodies of the people. This heavy, physical burden is a great and terrible equalizer. The wealthiest nobles in their cool, shaded palaces find no protection in their fine linen garments or their expensive, imported perfumes. The poorest laborers in the dusty streets suffer alongside the elite, sharing the exact same burning fever and the same inescapable discomfort. Even the grand magicians of the court, the wise men who have stood proudly beside the Pharaoh through every previous trial, are brought entirely to their knees. They are physically unable to stand before Moses, retreating into the shadows as their own bodies betray them in the most humbling way possible. The bustling noise of the great empire fades into a quiet, pained murmur. The marketplace is empty as the merchants abandon their stalls, desperately seeking the cool shade of their private rooms. The grand, vibrant life of Egypt is completely paused, replaced by the hushed sounds of suffering and the desperate search for relief. People carefully apply cooling balms of crushed lotus and sweet honey to their inflamed skin, trying in vain to draw out the unnatural burning heat. Every movement requires careful, painful deliberation, forcing the entire kingdom into a slow, mandatory state of rest. Yet, even as his own people retreat into the dark, and his trusted magicians fall away, the Pharaoh refuses to bend. He sits upon his magnificent throne, his own skin burning with the very same painful affliction, yet his heart remains encased in a fortress of unbreakable stone. He clenches his fists, enduring the profound physical torment, rather than speaking the simple words of release. It is a deeply tragic display of human stubbornness, a ruler willing to drag his entire nation down into the ashes, simply to protect his own flawless image of divine supremacy. The golden crown feels incredibly heavy, resting atop a man who has completely lost his way. Far away from the stifling heat of the royal palace, the land of Goshen remains a sanctuary of profound, unbroken health. The Israelites go about their daily routines, their skin perfectly clear, and their bodies entirely free from the burning fever. The invisible dust of the kilns passed over their homes without leaving a single trace, a powerful, silent confirmation of the divine boundary that protects them. They look down at their strong, unblemished hands, breathing deep sighs of immense, overwhelming gratitude. In the midst of a suffering world, their humble mud brick village has become an island of perfect, restorative peace. Imagine the incredible relief of that cool, healthy sanctuary. You are safely inside those protective borders, entirely insulated from the fever and the burning heat of the outside world. The air around you is perfectly clean, carrying the soothing, sweet scent of the nearby river and the cool dampness of the evening shadows. Take a moment to focus on the feeling of your own body, safe and perfectly at rest in this present moment. Feel the comfortable, soothing texture of the blankets resting lightly against your skin, bringing warmth without any burden. If you hold any quiet tension or physical ache from the long hours of your day, imagine a cool, soothing breeze gently washing over you. Picture that refreshing air drawing the heat out of your tired muscles, replacing any discomfort with a deep, expansive sense of relief. Starting from the very top of your head, feel that cooling sensation slowly traveling down your neck, releasing the tight muscles of your shoulders. Let it flow smoothly down your arms, through your chest, and deep into your legs, until every inch of you feels incredibly light and profoundly relaxed. Your body is a safe, quiet haven, perfectly designed to heal and restore itself in the peaceful dark. The ancient cities of Egypt eventually find their way into the night, hiding their pain in the quiet shadows of the great stone monuments. Tomorrow will bring new dramatic challenges to the hardened throne, but tonight is simply a time for resting weary bones and seeking comfort in the cool air. Let your own mind retreat entirely from the heavy demands of the waking world. There is absolutely nothing you need to accomplish right now, and no burden you need to carry into your dreams. You are perfectly held by the quiet stillness of the room around you. Breathe in very slowly, feeling the calm, steady rhythm of your own heart. Exhale with a long, gentle sigh, letting go of the past and floating effortlessly on the surface of the present moment. The grand, turbulent stories of history are simply echoes in the distance, fading softly into a beautiful, comforting nothingness. Sink deeply into your rest, enveloped in absolute peace and profound safety. Sleep well, and let the gentle current of the night carry you softly toward a brighter dawn. The feverish heat that had settled over the grand cities of Egypt slowly begins to break, leaving behind a kingdom that is utterly exhausted and deeply scarred. The physical suffering from the terrible ashes of the kilns has gradually faded, but the psychological toll of the prolonged struggle hangs heavy in the still, stagnant air. The usually vibrant, bustling empire feels completely drained of its energy, moving with the slow, deliberate caution of someone recovering from a long and weary illness. The sky above remains a stark, brilliant blue, completely devoid of clouds, radiating a relentless, unforgiving warmth over the sun-baked earth. It is a day that desperately begs for a cooling rain, for any sign of gentle relief from the punishing heat of the desert. Early in the morning, before the sun reaches its highest point, Moses makes his way back toward the imposing stone walls of the royal palace. The Pharaoh, whose own body has barely recovered from the affliction, rises early to meet the shepherd, his face a complex map of weariness and unbroken pride. Moses stands tall and delivers a message that contains a terrifying promise, but also, for the very first time, a profound opportunity for mercy. He warns that at this exact time tomorrow, a storm unlike any the kingdom has ever seen will unleash its fury upon the land. He speaks of a devastating hail, a relentless downpour of heavy ice that will shatter everything left unprotected in the open fields. But in the midst of this grave warning, Moses offers a clear path to safety. He instructs the Pharaoh and all the people of Egypt who will listen to immediately gather their remaining livestock and bring their servants indoors. He tells them to find shelter under the thick, protective roofs of their stone houses, because every living thing left out in the fields will certainly perish. It is a direct test of belief, a chance for the people of Egypt to show that they have learned to respect the immense power of the shepherd's God. The warning echoes through the long painted corridors of the palace, rippling outward into the crowded streets and the vast agricultural estates. For the first time since the plagues began, a deep division completely fractures the unity of the Egyptian people. The relentless series of trials has quietly broken the absolute faith they once held in their own invincible gods. Many of the Pharaoh's own officials, men who had previously sneered at the humble Israelites, look up at the clear blue sky with genuine trembling fear. They do not wait for royal permission. They immediately dispatch messengers to their vast estates, ordering their herdsmen to drive the cattle into the thick-walled barns. They pull their servants inside, locking their heavy wooden doors and retreating into the deep, safe shadows of their homes. Yet there are others whose pride remains just as stubborn as the ruler they serve. They look at the perfectly clear, sun-drenched sky and laugh at the absurdity of the warning, unable to imagine a storm of ice in a land that barely knows the rain. They stubbornly leave their valuable servants working in the fields and their remaining cattle grazing in the open pastures, trusting completely in the familiar, unchanging patterns of the desert climate. The entire kingdom is caught in a strange, tense twilight of anticipation, divided between those who humbly seek shelter and those who arrogantly stand their ground. The golden sun slowly sets, giving way to a restless, profoundly uneasy night. When the dawn of the promised day arrives, the atmosphere feels completely different, heavy and charged with an unnatural energy. The temperature drops dramatically, entirely stripping away the oppressive, familiar heat of the Egyptian morning. The sky is no longer a bright, welcoming blue, but a bruised, turbulent expanse of deep violet and unnatural, sickly green. Massive, mountainous clouds roll in from the north, completely swallowing the sun and plunging the great cities into an eerie, terrifying midday twilight. The wind begins to howl, sweeping through the tall columns of the temples and rattling the wooden shutters of the terrified citizens. Moses stands entirely unprotected out in the open, his rough wool cloak whipping violently around him in the rising gale. He calmly raises his wooden staff high toward the turbulent, boiling heavens. At the exact moment he lifts his hand, the dark sky shatters with a blinding, terrifying flash of pure white light. A boom of thunder, louder than any battle drum, shakes the very foundations of the earth, echoing across the Nile and deep into the desert valleys. The heavens have completely opened, and the great storm of judgment begins its relentless, deafening descent. It does not rain water, but massive, jagged stones of solid ice. The hail falls with impossible, terrifying speed, striking the ground with a continuous, deafening roar that completely drowns out every other sound in the world. But it is not just ice that falls from the darkened sky. The hailstones are mixed with a continuous, flashing fire, bolts of lightning that strike the earth and run like liquid flame across the frozen ground. It is a terrifying, impossible combination of burning heat and freezing cold, a storm of absolute biblical proportions sweeping across the Golden Empire. Imagine watching this incredible display of natural fury from the deep, secure sanctuary of a heavy stone room. You are sitting safely beside a small, narrow window, looking out through the thick walls as the chaotic storm completely consumes the world outside. The sound of the ice violently smashing against the cobblestones is loud, but the thick limestone walls absorb the worst of the impact, turning the roar into a steady, distant drumming. The bright flashes of fire illuminate your quiet room for brief, beautiful moments, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls before retreating back into the dark. You are entirely surrounded by chaos, yet completely, perfectly safe inside your sturdy shelter. Out in the unprotected fields, the destruction is absolute and completely devastating. The heavy ice strikes down everything in its path, shattering the tall, elegant palm trees and stripping the leaves from the ancient orchards. The delicate crops of flax and barley, which were just beginning to bloom in the warm sun, are completely flattened and destroyed in a matter of minutes. And tragically, any man or beast that was left out in the open, foolishly ignoring the shepherd's warning, is completely struck down by the relentless bombardment of ice and fire. The magnificent, fertile landscape of Egypt is violently reduced to a bruised, shattered wasteland. But once again, a profound miracle of preservation is unfolding in the humble land of Goshen. While the rest of the kingdom is battered by the terrifying storm, the sky over the Israelite settlements remains completely calm. Not a single drop of rain, not a single stone of ice, and not a single flash of fire touches their simple mud brick homes. They stand in their doorways, listening to the distant, rolling thunder, entirely untouched by the devastating fury raging just miles away. It is a powerful, undeniable testament to the protective boundaries drawn by a power far greater than the chaotic storms of the earth. Inside his magnificent palace, the Pharaoh is completely overwhelmed by the terrifying noise and the violent shaking of his walls. He urgently sends for Moses and Aaron, his voice completely stripped of its usual regal arrogance. Amidst the roaring thunder, he loudly confesses that he has sinned, admitting that the Lord is entirely in the right. He begs Moses to entreat his God, pleading for the terrifying thunder and hail to finally cease, promising once more that the people will be allowed to go. Moses, knowing full well that the Pharaoh's heart will simply harden again once the storm passes, nonetheless agrees to step out into the chaos and spread his hands in prayer. As soon as the shepherd leaves the city walls and raises his hands to the sky, the transformation is completely instantaneous. The massive claps of thunder abruptly cease, the blinding flashes of fire vanish, and the heavy stones of ice stop falling from the heavens. The dark, boiling clouds immediately begin to break apart, allowing the golden rays of the afternoon sun to spill back over the battered, frozen landscape. The deafening roar of the storm is replaced by an incredible, profound silence. The quiet dripping of melting ice echoing softly in the ruined courtyards. The great trial of the shattered skies has come to a complete and sudden end. Let the sudden, beautiful silence of that ancient afternoon wash completely over you right now. If there are any chaotic storms raging in your own life, any heavy burdens or loud, stressful thoughts demanding your attention, simply visualize them passing away. Imagine yourself safely tucked inside a warm, secure stone fortress, completely protected from the cold winds and the noise of the outside world. The thick walls of your quiet sanctuary completely block out the chaos, leaving you with nothing but a deep, profound sense of safety and calm. You are entirely out of reach from the storms of the day. Take a slow, deep breath of the cool, freshly washed air, feeling it expand your chest and entirely relax your shoulders. As you slowly exhale, let go of any lingering tension, letting it melt away just like the ice under the warm, comforting sun. The sky is completely clear now, the air is perfectly still, and the world is finally at rest. Allow your mind to drift gently away on the quiet, peaceful currents of the ancient river. Sleep safely, resting in the comfortable knowledge that all storms eventually pass, and peace always returns to the silent earth. The heavy, jagged stones of ice from the great storm slowly begin to melt under the returning warmth of the Egyptian sun. As the morning light washes over the battered landscape, the true extent of the destruction is revealed in the quiet light of day. The once magnificent fields of flax and barley lie completely flattened, pressed into the muddy earth by the sheer weight of the unnatural tempest. The grand orchards, usually offering cool shade and sweet fruit, are reduced to splintered branches and stripped wood. A heavy, sorrowful stillness hangs over the ruined agricultural heart of the empire, as the people carefully step out of their stone shelters to survey what is left of their world. Yet, as the puddles of melted ice evaporate into the dry desert air, so too does the Pharaoh's sudden burst of humility. Surrounded once again by the unbroken stone walls of his opulent palace, his fear quickly subsides, replaced by the familiar, cold comfort of his own unyielding pride. He looks out over his ruined fields, but instead of seeing the consequences of his stubbornness, he only feels a deep, burning resentment. The brief moment of clarity he experienced during the deafening thunder is entirely forgotten, washed away by the returning silence. He hardens his heart once more, stubbornly refusing to honor the promise he made while the heavens were falling. Moses and Aaron are sent back to the towering throne room, their faces etched with a quiet, solemn determination. They do not come with anger, but with the weary patience of men who know they must finish a long and difficult journey. Moses delivers the next divine warning, speaking of an invasion unlike anything the ancient world has ever witnessed. He warns that if the Pharaoh refuses to let the people go, tomorrow will bring a swarm of locusts so vast it will cover the very face of the earth. These creatures will completely devour whatever the hail left behind, eating every remaining leaf, every spared stalk of wheat, and every single green thing that still survives in the wounded kingdom. For the first time since the standoff began, the Pharaoh's own trusted advisors actively rebel against his dangerous stubbornness. These proud noblemen, who have lost their herds and seen their vast estates completely shattered, step forward with trembling voices. They plead with their ruler to let the Israelite men go and serve their God, desperate to stop the endless wave of destruction. They look at the Pharaoh with exhausted, fearful eyes and ask, "Do you not yet understand that Egypt is completely ruined? The mighty empire is visibly bleeding, and even the most loyal courtiers recognize that another blow will plunge them entirely into the abyss." Swayed momentarily by the panic of his court, the Pharaoh summons the shepherds back and offers a fractured compromise. He agrees to let the men go into the wilderness to worship, but violently insists that the women, the children, and the livestock must remain behind as hostages. Moses stands his ground, his voice calm but absolutely uncompromising, explaining that everyone must go, for they are all bound to hold a feast to the Lord. The Pharaoh's temper immediately flares, his fragile patience shattering into pieces. He angrily drives Moses and Aaron from his presence, sealing the fate of the remaining greenery in his battered kingdom. Standing outside the grand city walls, under the bright, clear sky, Moses raises his wooden staff and stretches it out over the land of Egypt. Almost instantly, a profound shift in the atmosphere occurs. A steady, powerful wind begins to blow from the deep eastern desert, bringing with it an incredibly dry, baking heat. This is not a gentle, cooling breeze, but a relentless, howling force that sweeps across the sand dunes and whistles through the empty stone streets. The east wind blows continuously through the entire day and relentlessly through the dark night, carrying an eerie, invisible promise from the far edges of the world. When the morning dawns, the sky does not brighten with the usual golden light of the Egyptian sunrise. Instead, the horizon is completely choked by a massive, rolling cloud of oppressive darkness. As it draws closer, driven by the unwavering east wind, the cloud blocks out the sun, casting a strange, shifting shadow over the entire kingdom. It is a cloud made of millions upon millions of desert locusts, a swarming, living army arriving with terrifying precision. They descend upon the land with a deafening rustle of delicate wings, a sound like a heavy, rushing river moving through the dry air. The sheer volume of the swarm is impossible for the mind to fully comprehend. They land upon the earth in such unimaginable numbers that the ground itself can no longer be seen, completely covered by a shifting, crawling carpet of dark bodies. They blanket the walls of the palaces, cling to the massive stone pillars of the temples, and pour into the windows of every home. But their true devastation is entirely directed at the wounded natural world. What follows is not a violent storm, but a methodical, utterly complete consumption of the landscape. The sound of their feeding is a quiet, terrifying symphony that fills the air. It is the incredibly distinct sound of countless tiny jaws moving in absolute unison, a continuous crackling hum that echoes across the fields. They move with mechanical efficiency, stripping the surviving bark from the shattered trees and devouring the tiny green shoots that had bravely pushed through the mud. Every piece of fruit that had survived the hail is entirely eaten. They do not leave a single blade of grass, a single lotus flower, or a single green leaf anywhere within the borders of the vast Egyptian empire. By the time the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, the great agricultural powerhouse of the ancient world has been transformed into an absolute, barren wasteland. The vibrant greens and rich golds of the Nile Delta are completely gone, replaced by a dull, lifeless expanse of brown and grey. The visual shock of the stripped landscape is profound, an empty, haunting silence that weighs heavily on the hearts of the people. There is nothing left to harvest, nothing left to protect, and nothing left to sustain the immense pride of the Golden Throne. The devouring wind has entirely humbled the kingdom, leaving behind a stark, undeniable emptiness. In a state of absolute panic, the Pharaoh urgently calls for Moses and Aaron once more, his words rushing out in a desperate, pleading stream. He confesses his sin against God and against them, begging for forgiveness just this once, asking them to remove this deadly plague from his sight. Moses, moving with the same quiet, unwavering grace, steps out of the palace and entreats the Lord. The wind suddenly shifts, turning into a fiercely strong western gale that sweeps across the barren plains. It lifts the massive swarm into the air, carrying the millions of locusts away and casting them entirely into the dark waters of the Red Sea, until not a single one remains in all of Egypt. The swarm is completely gone, but the immense quiet emptiness they leave behind is deeply striking. The land has been completely stripped bare, stripped of its illusions, stripped of its wealth, and stripped of the distractions that keep the mind constantly busy. The silent, barren fields now stretch out under the twilight sky, offering a strange, melancholic kind of peace. There is no harvest to worry over, no crops to anxiously tend, and no labor left to perform in the empty orchards. The natural world has been entirely paused, forced into a deep, mandatory state of absolute rest. Imagine that same vast, quiet emptiness gently settling into your own mind right now. All the busy, buzzing thoughts that usually swarm through your head, the endless lists of tasks and the noisy distractions of the day have been swept entirely away. A strong, clearing wind has blown through your consciousness, carrying every single worry far out into the deep, silent sea. What remains is a beautiful, expansive space, clear and incredibly calm. You are left with nothing but the quiet, steady rhythm of your own breath, resting safely in the stripped-down, beautiful simplicity of the present moment. Allow yourself to find deep comfort in this peaceful, uncluttered sanctuary. You do not need to build anything, grow anything, or protect anything during these quiet hours. The heavy work of the day is entirely finished, and the landscape of your mind is perfectly, beautifully still. Breathe deeply into that vast, open space, feeling the cool night air soothe any lingering tension in your body. Let the profound silence of the ancient world wrap around you like a soft, heavy blanket, pulling you down into a state of total relaxation. As the stars begin to slowly appear over the quiet, barren desert, surrender completely to the stillness of the night. The great empire rests, exhausted but finally quiet, waiting in the shadows for the story to continue. Let your own eyes gently close, feeling the comfortable weight of sleep pulling you away from the waking world. Drift peacefully on the calm, silent currents of time, perfectly safe in the dark, empty beauty of the evening. Sleep well, and let the profound, restoring quiet wash completely over your soul. The great devouring swarm of locusts has been entirely washed away by the fierce western wind, leaving the grand empire of Egypt in a state of profound and haunting emptiness. The vast agricultural plains, once a vibrant tapestry of rich greens and golden wheat, have been stripped down to the bare, brown earth. The majestic trees stand like silent skeletons against the bright blue sky, their branches completely stripped of leaves and bark. A heavy, sorrowful silence has settled over the kingdom, replacing the usual bustling sounds of the harvest with a stark, undeniable stillness. The land has been forced into a deep, mandatory rest, entirely humbled by the immense power of the desert winds. Yet, despite looking out over a completely ruined landscape, the Pharaoh remains stubbornly seated upon his polished obsidian throne. The relief of the clear sky has once again deceived him into believing that the worst of the storms has finally passed. He wraps his fine linen robes tightly around himself, shutting out the desperate pleas of his own exhausted advisors. He absolutely refuses to honor the promise he made in his moment of panic, violently hardening his heart against the humble shepherd and the captive Israelites. His pride is a towering, unbreakable fortress, and it is about to draw the ultimate, suffocating shadow over his entire world. This time, there is no formal warning delivered to the royal court, and no quiet morning meeting by the edge of the great river. Moses does not seek an audience with the ruler, nor does he offer a deadline for a change of heart. He simply steps out under the bright golden rays of the morning sun and raises his weathered hand high toward the heavens. The reaction from the natural world is entirely instantaneous and absolutely terrifying. The brilliant, warming light of the sun is completely extinguished, swallowed up in the blink of an eye by a deep, unnatural void. This is not the gentle, comforting dusk that softly closes the day and invites the world to sleep. It is a sudden, oppressive, and absolute blackness that descends upon the golden cities of Egypt like a massive, heavy blanket. The ancient texts describe it as a darkness that can actually be felt. It is a physical weight in the air, a thick, suffocating pressure that presses against the skin and fills the lungs with a cold, terrifying dread. The grand, towering monuments and the shimmering waters of the Nile completely vanish from sight, instantly erased by the creeping tide of shadows. Panic immediately sweeps through the dark streets as the citizens desperately reach for their wooden torches and clay oil lamps. Servants strike their flints against the cold stone floors, desperately trying to spark a flame to push back the terrifying void. But the divine darkness is so incredibly thick that it completely swallows the light. The sparks simply die in the heavy air, and the oil refuses to burn. For the very first time in their lives, the people of Egypt are entirely robbed of their vision, plunged into a world where their eyes are completely useless. The theological impact of this moment is absolutely devastating to the proud empire. The supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon is Ra, the magnificent god of the sun, who is believed to conquer the darkness every single morning. But now, the brilliant sun has been completely defeated, overpowered by an unseen, unmatched authority. The grand temples of the sun god are submerged in pitch black, entirely empty of worship and devoid of power. The magnificent golden statues, designed to catch the morning light, sit blindly in the suffocating shadows, offering no protection and no comfort to the terrified priests. For 3 long, agonizing days and 3 endless, terrifying nights, the entire kingdom is completely immobilized. The heavy darkness prevents anyone from leaving their homes. They cannot see the walls of their own rooms. They cannot find the food on their tables. And they cannot even see the faces of the family members sitting right beside them. The vast, bustling empire is reduced to thousands of isolated, silent rooms, where individuals are trapped entirely within their own minds. It is a profound, forced meditation, an intense sensory deprivation that breaks the spirit far more effectively than any physical storm. Yet far away in the eastern delta, A beautiful, quiet miracle is unfolding in the humble land of Goshen. While the grand palaces of the elite are buried in a terrifying, heavy void, the homes of the Israelites are filled with a soft, warm glow. They have light in their dwellings. Their simple oil lamps burn steadily, casting dancing, comforting shadows against the mud brick walls. Families gather closely around their small cooking fires, sharing quiet meals and speaking in hushed, reverent tones about the incredible, invisible boundary that separates them from the suffering of their masters. Imagine the absolute peace of that protected, illuminated space. Outside their windows, an impenetrable wall of darkness holds the rest of the world completely captive. But inside, there is warmth, clarity, and an overwhelming sense of profound safety. They are completely insulated from the chaos, surrounded by a gentle, steady light that represents a divine, unwavering protection. It is a deeply comforting sanctuary, a quiet island of peace shining bravely in the middle of an infinite, silent sea. Back in the suffocating blackness of the royal palace, the Pharaoh is slowly losing his mind. He sits entirely alone on his cold throne, surrounded by invisible guards who cannot see to move or speak. The absolute silence and the heavy, pressing weight of the dark finally wear away the last remaining layers of his stubborn resolve. Unable to endure another moment of the terrifying isolation, he blindly calls out into the empty void, desperately commanding his servants to find the shepherd. Moses is brought before him, walking calmly through the pitch-black corridors, guided by a light that only he can truly perceive. The final negotiation between the two leaders is incredibly tense, their voices echoing loudly in the unlit throne room. The Pharaoh completely surrenders, telling Moses that all the people, including the women and children, may finally go and serve their God. But his pride makes one last, desperate attempt at control, violently insisting that the Israelites must leave all of their flocks and herds behind. Moses remains absolutely calm, but completely uncompromising. He replies that not a single hoof will be left behind, for they must take everything they own to make their sacrifices in the wilderness. This final refusal pushes the exhausted, terrified ruler entirely over the edge. His voice shakes with a furious, unhinged anger as he shouts into the darkness. "Get away from me," he screams. "Take heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall surely die." The heavy threat hangs in the cold air, a tragic testament to a man who has lost absolutely everything but refuses to let go of his own authority. Moses pauses in the shadows, his response quietly echoing with a chilling, profound finality. "You have spoken well," Moses says softly into the suffocating dark. "I will never see your face again." With those simple, heavy words, the great standoff is completely finished. The shepherd turns and walks away, leaving the ruler entirely alone in his ruined, blackened kingdom. The heavy darkness will soon lift, but the shadow resting over the golden throne has become entirely permanent, setting the stage for the final, devastating blow. As we pull away from this ancient, dramatic confrontation, allow the darkness of your own room to transform around you. The void that terrified the ancient empire does not need to be a source of fear for you. Instead, let the shadows of your quiet room become a soft, deeply comforting blanket that entirely wraps around your tired shoulders. You do not need to see anything right now. You do not need to navigate the complicated paths of the waking world, and you do not need to control the events happening outside your door. Breathe deeply into the quiet safety of the night. Feel the cool, gentle air, fill your lungs and let it out with a long, satisfying sigh of pure relief. Just like the protected families in the land of Goshen, you are entirely insulated from the chaotic storms of the world. Let the heavy, peaceful darkness hold you securely, melting away the stress of the day and quieting every anxious thought. Surrender completely to the stillness. Drift away into the comforting void, and let the quiet embrace of sleep restore you fully for the morning light. The suffocating heavy darkness that held the grand empire of Egypt captive for 3 long days finally begins to lift. The pale morning light slowly creeps back across the eastern horizon, revealing a kingdom that has been profoundly and irrevocably changed. The towering stone monuments and the vast empty fields emerge from the shadows, bathed in a sun that no longer feels victorious or warm. A deep, quiet exhaustion permeates the very air of the capital, as the terrified citizens cautiously unseal their doors and step out into the quiet streets. The world is visible once more, but a heavy, looming feeling of finality rests squarely upon the shoulders of every man and woman. Far away from the battered center of the empire, the humble land of Goshen remains perfectly calm. Moses gathers the elders of the Israelite people, standing before them with a quiet, solemn gravity that commands absolute silence. He does not speak of raising swords or preparing for a violent rebellion against their weary masters. Instead, the instructions he delivers are entirely focused on a quiet, intimate act of faith and profound preparation. This final night in the land of their captivity will not be won through the strength of human hands, but through careful obedience to a divine, protective command. The elders listen intently as Moses describes the specific preparations that must be made before the sun sets. Each family is instructed to select a lamb from their flocks, a creature completely without blemish, perfect and whole. It is a solemn, reverent task, a quiet acknowledgement of the deep sacrifice required to secure their ultimate freedom. The animals are chosen with gentle hands, representing the purity and the unyielding innocence that will soon stand as a shield between the people and the coming storm. A hushed, focused energy spreads through the mud brick villages as the families carefully follow the ancient instructions. As the late afternoon slowly gives way to twilight, the most crucial part of the preparation begins. The heads of the households step out of their small homes, carrying modest clay basins filled with the deep crimson blood of the sacrifice. In their other hand, they hold a simple, fragrant branch of the hyssop plant, gathered fresh from the edges of the desert. The setting sun casts a long, golden light over the dusty streets, illuminating the faces of the fathers and grandfathers as they approach their doorways. The air is incredibly still, filled with an overwhelming sense of historical weight and quiet, focused purpose. With a slow, deliberate motion, the hyssop branch is dipped into the clay basin. The head of the house raises the branch and gently strikes the top of the wooden doorframe, leaving a stark painted mark of crimson. He then moves to the left side and finally to the right, creating a distinct, unmistakable seal over the entrance of his home. This simple, quiet act is repeated down every narrow street and across every small alleyway in the Israelite settlements. The painted doors stand as a silent, powerful testimony, a visible boundary separating the protected from the unprotected. The visual contrast is deeply striking in the fading light of the evening. The rough, brown mud brick of the humble homes is completely transformed by the bold, protective strokes of red. To the passing eye, it might seem like a strange, chaotic ritual, but to the families watching from within, It represents an absolute, unbreakable guarantee of safety. The blood on the doorposts is not a symbol of death, but a profound, undeniable declaration of life and preservation. As the final rays of the sun disappear below the horizon, the people retreat inside, softly closing their heavy wooden doors behind them. Inside the homes, the atmosphere is a unique blend of solemn reverence and quiet, pulsing anticipation. The small clay ovens radiate a comforting warmth, filling the rooms with the rich, savory aroma of the roasted lamb. The families gather closely around their low wooden tables, sharing a meal that has been carefully prepared according to the strict divine instructions. They eat the meat accompanied by bitter herbs, a sharp sensory reminder of the harsh, tear-filled decades of their painful bondage. And they break unleavened bread, flat and crisp, because there is simply no time left to wait for the dough to slowly rise. They do not recline comfortably on their woven mats, nor do they eat with the relaxed posture of people settling in for the evening. They consume this sacred meal fully dressed for a long, arduous journey. Their rough wool cloaks are tucked into their belts, their worn leather sandals are securely fastened to their feet, and their wooden walking staffs rest firmly in their hands. It is a posture of absolute readiness, a physical expression of their unwavering belief that the long-awaited moment of liberation has finally arrived. Every bite is taken with the quiet knowledge that they will never eat another meal in the land of their captivity. Outside the painted doors, the night completely claims the Egyptian landscape. It is an unusually quiet evening, completely devoid of the normal sounds of the bustling river or the distant, echoing chants of the temple priests. A profound, heavy stillness settles over the grand cities, the vast, empty fields, and the towering stone monuments. The entire world feels as though it is waiting, holding its breath in the dark spaces between the stars. The air grows incredibly cold, a sharp, distinct chill that seems to penetrate straight through the thickest walls of the royal palaces. As the midnight hour steadily approaches, a strange, sweeping presence begins to move across the ancient land. It is not a violent storm, it brings no deafening thunder, and it casts no visible shadow against the moonlight. It is a silent, invisible force, moving with a terrible, absolute authority through the empty cobblestone streets. It sweeps past the Grand Sphinx, glides silently over the smooth limestone of the pyramids, and flows deeply into the heart of the capital city. The final, devastating judgment is unfolding, bringing the greatest empire on earth entirely to its knees in the dead of the night. But when this sweeping, invisible presence reaches the humble borders of Goshen, it encounters the painted doors. The crimson marks on the wooden frames glow faintly in the darkness, acting as a perfect, impenetrable shield. The divine force sees the blood and passes over the home, leaving the family inside completely untouched and entirely safe. Inside those small, warm rooms, the Israelites sit in absolute, profound quiet. They can hear the wind gently rustling the palm leaves outside, but they feel absolutely no fear, completely anchored by the unbreakable promise of their God. The deep tragedy occurring in the rest of the kingdom remains distant, entirely separated from the peaceful sanctuary of the Israelite homes. We do not need to look upon the sorrow of the Pharaoh or listen to the cries echoing in the grand stone halls of the elite. Instead, we remain focused on the incredible, overwhelming sense of security that fills the rooms behind the painted doors. It is a deeply comforting realization of being seen, valued, and perfectly protected amidst a world of chaotic, shifting powers. The families hold on to each other, closing their eyes and breathing in the quiet, steady air of their deliverance. Imagine the incredible depth of that absolute peace wrapping around your own mind right now. You are safely tucked behind your own protective barriers, completely insulated from the demands and the heavy storms of the outside world. The worries that normally knock at your door are entirely turned away, unable to cross the threshold into your quiet personal sanctuary. The air in your room is calm, perfectly still, and deeply restoring. You can let go of the need to be vigilant, setting down your own walking staff and allowing your weary muscles to completely relax. Take a long, slow breath in, feeling the quiet security of the present moment fill your lungs. Let the breath out with a soft, gentle sigh, releasing any remaining tension from your neck, your shoulders, and your back. The midnight hour has safely passed, and the slow, steady march toward a beautiful, promising dawn has quietly begun. The ancient, turning stars continue their peaceful journey across the vast, dark sky, watching over a world that is finally moving toward its ultimate liberation. There is absolutely nothing left for you to carry tonight. Allow your thoughts to settle completely, drifting like soft, weightless clouds over the quiet desert landscape. The grand story is pausing in the shadows, waiting patiently for the morning light to reveal the open road ahead. Sink deeper into your resting place, completely held by the deep, tranquil silence of the ancient night. Let the profound calm wash over every inch of your body, entirely softening your mind. Relax completely, knowing that you are safe, protected, and entirely at peace. The deepest hour of the night has finally passed, and a soft, pale grey begins to bleed into the eastern sky over the ancient land of Egypt. The air is incredibly cool, almost crisp, carrying a profound and heavy silence that seems to stretch across the entire horizon. In the grand city of the Pharaoh, the flickering oil lamps have long since burned out, leaving the massive stone temples and the winding streets in a state of solemn, exhausted shadow. But as the first light of dawn touches the peak of the highest pyramid, the stillness is broken by a sound that will echo through history forever. It is the sound of thousands of wooden doors slowly creaking open at the exact same moment. Behind the painted door frames of Goshen, the Israelite families step out into the fresh morning air. They do not move with the frantic energy of a panicked crowd, but with the steady, rhythmic purpose of a people whose time has finally arrived. The men, women, and children are fully prepared, their cloaks fastened tight and their walking staffs in hand, just as they were commanded during the sacred meal. There is no shouting, no triumphant fanfare, only the quiet, focused shuffling of thousands of sandals against the dusty earth. A massive, living river of people begins to flow outward, moving away from the mud brick houses that have been their only world for generations. In the heart of the capital, the transformation is absolute. The Pharaoh, whose heart was once as unyielding as the granite of his throne, has finally been humbled by the overwhelming weight of the night's events. He sends no soldiers to block the path and no chariots to stall the departure. In fact, the people of Egypt themselves are now urging the Israelites to leave with a desperate, fearful haste. They press gold, silver, and fine linens into the hands of their former servants, wanting nothing more than for the shadow of the plagues to be lifted from their ruined land. The wealth of the greatest empire on earth is quietly handed over in the soft light of the morning. Imagine the incredible sight as this vast assembly reaches the edge of the cultivated land and steps into the open desert. Behind them lie the towering monuments, the empty pastures, and the deep, dark river that saw their long years of sorrow. Ahead of them lies the infinite, golden expanse of the wilderness, a land of mystery, challenge, and ultimate freedom. The rising sun catches the dust kicked up by the departing flocks, turning the horizon into a shimmering golden haze. For the first time in 400 years, the people of Israel are breathing the air of a world that belongs entirely to them. Leading this massive procession is a pillar of cloud that seems to descend directly from the heavens. It moves slowly and majestically, a soft, swirling anchor of white that guides them through the shifting sands. It offers a cool, protective shade from the growing heat of the desert sun, a constant and visible reminder that they are never truly alone on their journey. Moses walks near the front, his weathered face reflecting a deep, quiet peace that surpasses all understanding. The heavy burden he carried back from the burning bush has been lifted, replaced by the simple, steady rhythm of the long walk ahead. As the day progresses, and the empire of Egypt fades into a distant, low silhouette on the horizon, a profound sense of calm settles over the travelers. The chains of the past have been entirely broken, not through the violence of war, but through the quiet strength of faith and the steady passage of time. The noise of the brickyards and the shouts of the taskmasters are now nothing more than fading echoes, lost in the vast open spaces of the desert. Every step forward is a step away from the shadows and a step closer to the promise of a new home. The journey is long, but the path is clear, and the spirit is finally at rest. The sunset on this first day of freedom is the most beautiful the people have ever seen. The sky turns a deep, vibrant violet, and the stars emerge one by one, shining with a clarity that feels personal and protective. The pillar of cloud slowly transforms into a pillar of fire, a warm, glowing beacon that illuminates the camp and keeps the darkness at bay. Families settle down in the soft sand, wrapped in their cloaks, listening to the gentle, rhythmic breathing of their children and the soft braying of their animals. It is a night of profound, restorative sleep, the first night of a new life. Think about the incredible lightness of that first evening in the wilderness. All the structures of the old world, the heavy stones, the rigid rules, and the crushing expectations have been left far behind. What remains is only the vast open sky and the quiet, steady earth beneath you. You are a traveler in your own life, moving away from the things that have held you captive and walking toward a horizon filled with quiet possibility. The air is perfectly still, the fire is warm and steady, and the night is a vast sanctuary of absolute peace. Let your own mind find that same sense of expansive, open freedom right now. Imagine yourself lying beneath that ancient starlit sky, far away from the noise and the demands of your daily routine. The stories of the 10 plagues, the dramatic clashes of kings, and the great storms of the past have all faded into the distance. They have served their purpose, leading you safely to this quiet place of rest. You are unburdened, you are safe, and you are entirely free to let go of everything. Breathe in the cool, silent air of the deep desert, feeling it expand your chest and soften your heart. Exhale slowly, letting the long, peaceful breath carry away the very last traces of the day's tension. Your journey through history has come to a gentle and beautiful conclusion. The road is quiet, the fire is dimming, and the stars are keeping their eternal, silent watch over your rest. Sink deeply into the soft embrace of your bed, feeling the world around you dissolve into a beautiful, weightless calm. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the sands of time. It has been a pleasure to guide you through the shadows of the ancient palaces and the quiet light of the desert stars. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to subscribe and leave a comment sharing your favorite part of tonight's journey. Your support helps us keep these stories alive, bringing peace and history to nights just like this one. The morning will bring a new light and a new path, but tonight belongs entirely to the silence. Allow yourself to drift away on the gentle, rolling waves of the desert night, moving further and further into a deep, dreamless sleep. The story is finished, the people are free, and you are perfectly at peace. Close your eyes, let the quiet of the ages hold you, and sleep safely until the dawn. Good night, and rest well.